guys, we're back in the shop and we're going to start working on the wings for the HB29. And I've got everything laid out here. I'll give you some close-ups of some of the things I discovered as I began assembling parts and everything. This will be the first section that we'll actually build on plans. And remember, when you're working on folded plans, or really any plans where you're working with paper, you never know exactly whether the paper has shrunk or enlarged or whatever due to humidity. So you're using the plans on paper as a guideline, but you're not really necessarily using it to exact measurement. Everything looks pretty good with this, but we've taped everything down to our building board, and we've then put wax paper on top of the plan so our glue doesn't stick to it. Pretty common building practices there. I'm going to show you close-ups of things because there are some things in the directions that are a little bit unclear until you study them. Again, the key on this whole process, I believe, is really studying the plans and really taking your time to review things before you start gluing things down. So we'll give you some close-ups here, and then we'll begin building the wing, and by the end you'll be able to do your own wing, and I think you'll see the process goes pretty smooth. Okay, you see here where we've got our plans taped to our metal building board and then wax paper over the plans. Pretty standard, as I said before. A couple things I want to point out to you. It is important that you really begin to study, because in the wing section there's only a brief written description and everything else is pictorial. So you really got to study it, and all the parts are labeled. One thing that is a little confusing is this part right here. This is a top and bottom view of the same thing, and as you can see, the part P21 and part W18-1. Well, that didn't make a lot of sense. Again, go to your parts list and you can find out where P21 is, and then you can also find W18-1. But in studying it and kind of evaluating it, you can see on the plans it's asking for W18, W18-1, which doesn't show up there, but does show up here, and there's no mention of P21 here. So what you have to do is kind of infer that these parts stack in order to fit right here. So you're going to get P21 right at the top, and then you stack down. W18 goes next, and W18-1 is on the bottom. So they do end up stacking and looking like that. So be aware of that. Another thing is, let's see here. I know. When I'm building kits, there's usually a fair amount of scrap that's left over that you can kind of make little parts from, or if you make a mistake, you can cut a part from. Well, with these kits, they are not wasting balsa, because there is like zero scrap. And I found that out when I decided, hey, I need to make another little piece for my battery tab. So I said, well, let me just use this piece of plywood here. That looks like a pretty open area. Well, no, because this whole unit is a part you're going to need as one of your servo trays. Luckily, I've got an extra piece of ply that I can cut this out. But do not assume that you have scrap in this kit, because you literally have none. So, I mean, everything is just... They use every spare inch of balsa on this. So be aware of that, okay? So if you have to cut apart, make sure you have your own pieces, because like me, sometimes you make a mistake, and that's cool. So I was able to make sure that I went through and pulled all of my parts out. Everything's there. Understanding where things go and why they go there is important before you start dropping glue on anything, okay? So one thing that's also kind of cool is usually in my experience, when you're building a wing, that you're starting with a main spar and then dropping your ribs over that main spar. A little bit different here because they're using this plywood right here is kind of a spar brace or webbing at the same time. So it's going to be both webbing and spar. Now you're going to add balsa here on the top and bottom that will be glued to this, so you've got some real structural strength like that. But in the beginning stages, it was interesting because I'm not used to seeing that as my building block. Everything is cut, cross-cut, so that what you're going to do is slide the tab so that it sets in and everything is tabbed and slotted and everything kind of lines up nicely. This piece right here, not a lot of instruction on what this piece or what to use here in the directions. So again, really studying. Now it is written here on your plans, the different things you're going to use here. So study this, study the plans, study your parts, get everything kind of together before you start dropping glue on anything, because you don't want to make a mistake right off the bat here. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set the camera down. I'm going to do some building, put some glue on things, and then we'll come back and show you a finished product. All right, we're about ready to lay the building blocks to the wing, and what we're going to start with is this webbing spar configuration right here. So I don't ever trust plans for giving me a true straight line. So we're going to start this by first establishing a perfectly straight line and getting our webbing spar true all the way down here. So we've got things dead straight on, perfectly vertical, using our magnets, our ruler, and our 90-degree magnet setup here. So all of these are true 90s, and we know now that we've got a perfectly straight line and a perfectly vertical line right here. So you can see right down the money. Now, why do we use a ruler? Because paper changes over time. So that gives us our foundational building block to make sure that our wing is true. I'm still test fitting everything to make sure that everything's going to go together before I put in glue. I've got these ribs in place here, and I'm using the 3-2-1 blocks to get perfectly perpendicular lines here. Now, because of this wing tube here needs to slide through all these ribs here, I want to make sure that they're all lined up, so I put the tube in place before I've added glue. And the plans indicate that this is going to extend from this little part right here, where is it? Right there, all the way through and come out here and be flush with the outside edge of this plywood rib right here. So that plywood rib, which is this one right here, is going to actually be flush and right into the fuselage. So obviously your strength is coming from plywood, not balsa. So we have to make sure that this tube extends to the flush edge, outside edge of the balsa, or excuse me, of the plywood. And right now, as you can see, if we've got that distance there, that's going to be flush right there. But that does not come all the way out to the W31, which theoretically it is supposed to come all the way through here. So it's just a little shy of that. So what I'm going to do, because I want to make sure we've got good structural contact with this plywood rib. Again, these are all balsa here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a piece of ply and put it on this side of the rib, so we definitely got good contact with the wing tube and the plywood rib. No big deal. I'll just cut a little piece like this, drill my hole, and glue it right to this. So that gives me structural integrity all the way across from plywood to plywood. I'm inserting this piece of video right here after the wing is built to show you something that I didn't point out in the wing build, and that is the fact that the tube, the wing tube, already has the dihedral built into the slope of that tube. So each of the ribs, the holes aren't lined up perfectly, they slant in order to give you your dihedral. So when you're building, you can see I'm moving on to this other wing here. You can see that the rib right now, the first rib, the rib that's going to be touching the fuse, when it's straight up, is not touching the W10-1 and W10. So as you can see, the dihedral is built in there. So you're going to make sure that when you glue that, you glue it to match that dihedral right there. So here is at 90, and you can see that gap there. So you want to make sure you build it with that gap missing. So you've got your dihedral built in, so that when it touches or attaches to the fuse, it's got the proper angle to attach. So the wing now is fully glued and all pretty much done. It took me only about an hour to do, and what I found is that I'm using a lot more super thin CA than anything else right now, because all the interlocking parts fit so snugly that the thin CA, you can just see it puff almost every time. So it's really a tight fit all the way through, which is really nice. Now you can see I've got all my hold downs. Now, as I said, I don't use pins, I use magnetic hold downs and 3-2-1 blocks to get everything square, perpendicular, which you can see, and all of my 90-degree angle magnetics and hold downs all keep everything in position and lined up properly. Now, I have waited for rib W0, which is this rib right here. Now this is the plywood rib that actually makes contact with the fuselage over here. And there are 2 alignment points, so I wanted to make sure that I concentrated on that after everything else was built. So what I'm going to do, because the W0 offsets from the other rib, which is W1, so how do you get that in the proper position until you get your alignment points in there? So we've got 2 alignment points. One is the wing tube right here, and the other one is the registration pin, which goes in through the wing and into the fuselage. So you have two alignment points into the fuselage. So what I'm going to do, because this, I can't just, boom, it's done. I've got to fudge it, or just work with it a little bit to get it perfectly lined up. So I don't want to use CA here. I'm going to use my alphatic resin so that I've got time to work with it and get it all lined up, and then I'll just clamp it off and let it set for a bit. Okay, so the wing went together really well. You can see everything is straight and true, which is exactly what you need for a wing, and everything is straight and true this way because I've got a perfectly level building board, perfectly flat and level building board. So with a wing, you know that's critical. Alright, so we'll get that thing locked in there, and then we'll go to wing number 2. Okay guys, so I have completed the left wing now. You can see we've added our leading edge. When I say complete, I haven't sanded it or anything or shaped the leading edge. I've just got the construction part done. The sheeting for near the fuselage is all done. You can see it's even capped off at the bottom here, which is kind of nice. Sheeting all laid down pretty smoothly, just a little bit of sanding for fitting, but that's normal. Shaped nicely. I've already now glued in my wing tube right here, and I've also glued in my pin registration tube, which is right here. Now this obviously aligns it. This plugs into the fuselage, and that will align the wing in the proper position. Now, one thing I wanted to show you here is I have no idea why, when I was building this part right here, that it didn't connect to me that that's where the the strut goes down to the floats from the wing. I don't know why. I don't know why. And my intention had always been to not use the wood screws that the kit asks you to use. It's asking for us to use wood screws through the aluminum brace and into this ply. I don't want to use wood screws, because if you're taking this on and off, if you're transporting the plane without the wings on, so you're constantly threading in and threading out that wood screw, it's going to be a disaster eventually. So what I'm going to end up doing is carving out this balsa right here to give me a slot, and then I'm going to put in blind nuts right here, so that I can use like a 440 blind nut and a screw that holds the strut to the wing. And when I build the other wing, the other side, the right hand side, I'll just eliminate this balsa piece right here, and I'll install my blind nut before I put it in place. So I have no idea why I didn't know what I was doing when I did that. Now I'll probably have to actually install that blind nut when I get to the point where I am actually positioning that strut, so I know exactly where it's going to fall. And I think that's probably why they have no preset hole there, is because where that wing strut is going to actually end up meeting is somewhat fluid at this stage. So now the next step that I've got this all designed is it going to fit on the fuselage? I don't know yet. I haven't even tried it. So what I'm going to do is live, we're going to go ahead and see how it fits on the fuse, and you'll find out same time I do how well it fits. So here's my fuse. This is the wing tube that's going to go through the fuselage. You can remember if we put that in there, the tube through the fuse back in the fuselage steps. So this will then plug right in here, and then theoretically that pin registration mark will land right in here. So here we go. We'll see. Let's see what happens. Let's get that in first. Right, that's set. Oh, look at that. Like butter. Look at that. It is right on the money. How awesome is that? Man, didn't you have to fight it? It just went right in there. Good job, Dancing Wings. That's exciting, isn't it? Begin to see something happen in there. Pretty cool stuff. So now we're going to go ahead and build side 2. I'm not going to do a video on side 2 because it's exactly the same thing. And one of the great things is they give you the paper plans for for the other side, so you're not in danger of building two right hand or two left hand wings. So we'll go ahead and build the other one, and I'll come back and we'll show you the same thing we just showed you, the fitting part, so you can see how everything goes together. But dig that, huh? Good stuff. Okay guys, we have completed both wings. We have the right and left wing in position, and right off the board they fit perfectly to the fuselage. I didn't have to do any messing around, any kind of cutting or drilling. Everything just fit perfectly. So looks like it's a well-designed kit so far. I really like seeing that wingspan. That's pretty cool. The bigger the better, huh? And as you can see, I have one of our ailerons built. You don't need any instructions on the aileron. This is pretty straightforward. So just follow your plans in your book, and the aileron goes together in just a few minutes. So there we go. That'll conclude our wing assembly, and we'll dive in next to control surfaces for the tail, and then the floats. Not sure which one we'll do next, but we'll do one of those next. So pretty sweet. Really like how it's looking so far. There's your wings.